Welcome to the Lightforge. This is Abukta.
This is Merps. We got expansion news. Expansion is here. Well, it's not here. Sorry. It's actually way, way far off. But we got the announcement to the further announcement, but we know what the expansion is. So, boom. We're
Boom.
good.
Boom, exactly. Boom. This is the Boomsday expansion featuring Dr. Boom, everyone's favorite villain or just overall friendly guy that's always played on turn 7 in every single constructed deck back in the day.
Yeah. So it's weird, right? Like, they actually. Well, I guess it's not that weird. There's always going to be some sort of harkening back at some point. And they've already made sort of like remakes of characters anyways. Like we had Rag and then we had like Rag and Lightforge, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to sort of have one be the focus of an expansion, I haven't seen that just yet. But anyways, it's pretty cool. Like, and we don't have so many cards to talk about this week, but
Alright, this is gonna be a chill episode because our
yeah.
plan is to talk about Boomsday. Because really, you don't want to hear about anything besides Boomsday, and we don't have a lot to say about Boomsday because we haven't seen a lot. But let's back up for a bit before we tell you what Boomsday is about, card wise or mechanics wise. Which like we literally know one mechanic and 6 cards right now. That's like no information, and 3 of the cards are legendary. It's kind of terrible, but. I do want to know what you want to happen in the next expansion.
Ooh.
Like,
Okay.
we don't know enough cards right now to really make any kind of predictions or anything, but for the arena, what would you want to happen that would make the meta better? Because remember, we're micro-adjusting now, so all the classes are balanced. We're bucketing now, and in the bucket system, so every pick is like kind of meaningful. What are you seeing in the meta that makes you want to like nudge it one way or the other way?
Right. And we're just limiting it to the cards, right? Not like, and we've gone over this before.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like,
Now you can't change any
okay.
arena rules or anything. Just in terms
Okay.
of the cards, what would you like to see? Like if this was your dream design.
Gotcha. Well, first of all, I think things that encourage turn planning, I think is a good idea, right? So some sort of mechanic in which you have, let's say, some sort of delayed benefit to it, right? Like I was gonna say like some sort of echo effect, but echo is actually a keyword now. But something that perhaps you do this and then you get a small. So like you pay 3 mana for a small, tiny effect, maybe not really worth 3 mana, but then you later on get like
So like a
something that's
less
like worth
intense
it.
version of Stasis Dragon.
Less intense version of Stasis Dragon, which I think we both agree was a pretty good card, right? Like
Stasis
I
Dragon is
think,
still my favorite card of
yeah,
Taverns of
yeah.
Time.
So Stasis Dragon, or even something like I'm not saying the design of it was particularly good, but it just came to mind. Forgotten Torch, right? So something in which you 3 mana,
Yeah.
deal 3 damage, which isn't great, and then you get a better Fireball, which is really good. It's not game breakingly good,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think sort of a Stasis Dragon kind of Forgotten Torch kind of thing. That would be cool. What I just don't want to see is sort of like very high variance cards. Like there's 2 things I don't want to see. So first is extremely high variance cards, aka Spiteful Summoner, right? Or sort of like Raven Familiar, in that like, man, it's such a huge difference whether you hit and if you hit, right? Like,
Well,
and what you hit on
well, now that we're
versus
talking
not
about
you're not hitting.
extremely high variance, why don't we go to the board here and look at
Oh
well, we'll
man.
read this out loud for the people on the podcast, but if you're looking at it, I'm gonna pull this up on the actual screen as well. One of the cards in Boomsday is Omega Defender. It is an epic, so you're not going to see too much about it, and it's a minion, but it is neutral. And it is a 4 mana 2/6 taunt. So it is a Stegodon that is not a beast. And it has a battle cry that says, if you have 10 mana crystals, gain plus 10 attack, which makes it a 12/6 taunt.
Right. So on turn 10, when you play this is a 4 mana, 12/6 taunt. Severely overstated for its cost, right? I mean, just look at Lord of the Arena, which isn't a good card, but yeah. Also, for some reason, this isn't a mech.
Yeah, it's not a mech. I'm guessing
I think,
somehow it would have been broken if it was a mech or something. I don't know why it's not a mech.
yeah, who knows? But anyways, this is a fair. Well, I was gonna say, I'm like, yeah, very draftable, but we have to once again see what bucket it's in, right?
Yeah.
If Blizzard for some reason thinks that this is really good, then no, like you should not pick this.
It is good though.
No. But are you gonna like if they put it into the top bucket? Are you picking it?
Like
No.
over Primordial Drake?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely not.
I'm probably not picking this over
definitely
Primordial
not.
Drake.
Definitely
but like,
not. No.
it's one of the. It's better than a Yeti.
It's good.
Like,
oh yeah. Oh no. Well, yeah, there's a huge gap between Yeti and Primordial Drake, right? Let's be honest here.
Okay, I mean, there's like a 40-point gap between Yeti and Primordial Drake. I don't know if I call that huge.
Yeah,
it's
that's
the same
huge.
difference between a Primordial Drake and a Pyros.
I will say, look, Pyros. I will say, with something like Omega Defender, this is something in which, yes, the variance is huge. Like, obviously, plus 10 attack is huge. But I like the limits to it, right? It's like, okay, you have to wait until turn 10. That's number one. And that's a huge sort of limiting factor, right? Like, a lot of stuff has happened before turn 10. Number two, it has board presence in the taunt, but it doesn't have initiative, right? It's not like, you know, like the card that everyone hates, Ultimate Infestation, which is card advantage and initiative and life gain and all of this stuff. Like this taunt, and it has a huge amount of stats, but it doesn't have any initiative. And then also, it still only has 6 health, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, this is not a broken card, right?
No,
like,
definitely not.
You can meme about it all you want, but at the end of the day, it's just a really good card. It's not going to be the best neutral card we've seen. It's probably not even going to be on the same tier as the top neutral cards that we've seen. And that's good, right? Like, we don't want more of those. Like, no one wants more Primordial Drakes. No one wants more old pre-nerf Bone Mares. No one wants more Basilisks. They're not fun in the arena. And so, yeah, it's one of those things where you can design a huge swing, and it still ends up being okay. I'm not, like, terribly upset about this card or anything. And it is good design space, right? Like, it's not something I would have thought of myself.
Yep.
Okay. So before we get too far down that road, I want to talk about what I want to see in Boomsday. So you were talking about swings, right? About limiting swings, which is very important. And I want to talk about the other thing that is not like a combo-y swing kind of thing. I want to talk about curve. And how we don't have it anymore.
No, we definitely do not.
And how even in the bucket system, it's kind of painful to try to get a 2-drop curve. You can do anything else in the game, but you're not guaranteed to be able to get a 1-drop or 2-drop curve, even if you take every 1-drop and 2-drop offered to you. And that's kind of silly, right? Like, in the arena, the whole point of the bucket system is that you get to make the deck you want. But right now, we're not getting that thing that we're promised, because not through any fault of, like, you know, Blizzard's arena rules or anything, but because Blizzard just hasn't been printing any 2-drops. So what was GVG really good for? 2-drops. Hopefully Boomsday follows the same pattern and we'll get a good amount of neutral 2-drops. The real problem was Witchwood. Witchwood did not have neutral 2-drops in every single expansion that leads off a block before, like a year before Witchwood has had a decent number of 2-drops. Like Ungoro had a decent number of 2-drops. Old Gods had a decent number of 2-drops. And we didn't get that from Witchwood. So maybe we're gonna get it made up for it right now, right? Like, it's Boomsday. It's gonna be an RNG set. That's gonna happen. And it's going to be also, like, I guess a little bit more swingy than we'd probably like. Like, it's Boomsday, right? Like, if it wasn't swingy and RNG, it wouldn't be Boomsday.
Yeah. Looking at the GVG expansion right now, it's insane. It's just looking at, and this used to be the norm
Yeah.
and sort of what we expected. There were 2 neutral 1-drops, 7 neutral 2-drops, 5 neutral 3-drops, 4 neutral 4-drops, and I'm just like, what? This expansion tried to curve out on its own.
Yeah.
Essentially, yeah. The expansion tried to curve out on its own, and then it even had, like Salty Dog, and then a Force Tank Max.
And it wasn't
right?
like Nax was bad for curve. Nax had Zombie Chow and Spider. Like, if
Yeah,
you
Haunted
remember,
Creeper.
like, those are like
Yep.
overpowered curve cards. So you got a really bad meta after GVG came out. And I don't think they're going to repeat that, but we could really use like halfway back to GVG, where Blizzard's made several different kinds of meta before, but they haven't made an aggro curve stone like expansion. Knights of the Frozen Throne was probably the most nodded in that direction, but it was still more like, here are some tools to make your board better. But the only thing that actually made the board like bigger than it was supposed to be was Hildnir Frostrider. So I'm hoping for a little bit more support on there, and I think we might get it. Again, the idea is now that you have a bucket system, it's not like to force everyone to have 2-drops. You still don't need 2-drops. You could still have 1-drops and 3-drops, right? But if you want 2-drops, you should be able to get 2-drops. It's one thing about saying like, oh, I don't want to be forced to do that. You're never going to be forced to do that. There's too many taunts. There's too much removals now in the meta. You're just like, even if you just had the spell bonus back in GVG times, it would have made a huge difference. Like, just that. Not to mention that, like, if I can get, I don't know, maybe like 4 2-drops in this set, like legit actual 2-drops, I'd be happy.
Yep. I think so. Because we've swung so hard in the other direction, right? We're at a point where an expansion comes out, we just get Plated Beetle. It's like, oh, that's our de facto 2-drop for this expansion. We're good.
Tuskar,
right?
whatever, like, the Kalaka Crawler, like, these are things that define a meta. Why? Because they're the only 2-drop. And I'm hoping that goes away.
That's essentially it.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, so past the swings, right? The second thing I don't want to see, which you also just mentioned, is please no more Dragon Slayers, no more Galaka Crawlers.
Ugh.
I can't do these hate cards anymore.
I think Blizzard will stop printing them. They get a lot of hate for hate cards. Like, not just from arena players, but from constructed players too, because it's not like fun to put these cards in your decks.
And someone in our chat was telling me what Firebat sort of stated about all these hate cards, right? And obviously,
that it's like the most lazy design ever.
Right. So, like, Firebat is basically like, he's like, look, it's a card game that you're supposed to play. Well, like, and what, I don't want to put words in his mouth. I think this is what he said. Essentially, that like, if you print too many of these hate cards, you're diverting too large a percentage of the game into before the actual game starts.
Yes.
Right.
And that's already like a huge problem in constructed.
Yeah. Already a huge part. And this is why, like, a lot of players, spend a lot of time, playing those mind games, researching that. And obviously that should be an important part. But I think, some constructive players have expressed this notion that, like, hey, we don't want this to be too big a part of the game, right? We still, you still want to play it out. Like, you still need to play it out. It can't just be, because, at the most polarized level, it is literally just rock, paper, scissors, right? And you guess it correctly, you bring scissors when they bring paper, and it's like, boom. Like, the playing out is almost a formality at that point. Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, that's how I feel about constructed. But like, Hearthstone's made it. Like, it's just not a. Anyway, let's look at, like, limited doesn't have that problem really, anywhere near as bad as constructed does. No matter how bad these cards get, but still, you don't want to win and lose limited games because you played a dragon and they play Dragon Slayer, right? Like, that's not fun for anyone. Let's look at the new mechanic, right? If we're talking about what Doomsday is going to bring. Doomsday's Doomsday. Boomsday. God, this is gonna get me. Well, what's the acronym, by the way, for Boomsday? It's called the Boomsday Project, right? Is it
Yeah,
TBP or is it just BP?
we could just call it BP.
BP. Okay.
Yeah, BP.
That's not very easy to say either. Uh, well, what happened to the nice ones like GVG? Like that's so nice. GVG is so nice to say. Okay. BRM. Ugh, the good old days. Nax. Nax was great.
Dax is out.
All right. So the new mechanic for Boomsday is magnetic. Now, I'm
Mhm.
sure there's going to be more mechanics, and there's going to be more like sub mechanics that'll appear on like 4 different cards in the set, but like not really form a real thing, like more of a theme than anything. But the one that they rolled out with from the very beginning is called magnetic, and what it means is it's generally, I think, going to be on mechs, and it means if you have a mech, this can buff something, right?
Yep.
So you need to have a mech. It's not
Or
just that
you
this can back something, or can this just buff something normally?
no. It can't. Okay, so the buffing aspect
Uh
of
huh.
it only works if it's a mech. Otherwise, you can just play this normally as well. Like,
Right. So you could play it normally as a minion. So for example, to give you an idea of
yes.
what we're talking about, it's a 3 mana 2/2 hunter card that is a mech, and it has
Mhm.
magnetic, and it also has death rattle, destroy a random enemy minion. So a 3 mana 2/2 destroy a random enemy minion, death rattle is pretty good of a card. But once you add magnetic to it, it becomes kind of insane in mech decks, because what it means is you could turn it into a +2/+2 buff on any mech when you play it. And on top of that, it means that you can give this card initiative, because if you use it as a buff on a minion that can attack, you can kill it on the same turn and trigger your death rattle on the same turn you play it without any extra cards.
Right. Also, this is something that's important. You always have the choice of whether or not to use the magnetic keyword. So if you watch the video of how they explained it, um, if you play, so let's say you have a harvest golem, which is actually what they used in the video. If you have a harvest golem, that's the only thing on the board, and then you have a spider bomb. If you play the spider bomb to the left of the harvest golem, it triggers the magnetic fusion. If you play to the right, it doesn't trigger the fusion. So you have a choice as well. This isn't forced on you.
Mm-hmm.
So like right, you can either choose to fuse it
Yeah.
or you can choose to not fuse it.
And it's not a new mechanic. It's like Demon Fire. If you think back to even Classic, it's already kind of in the game where if you trigger a particular synergy, this can be a buff, but otherwise it does something else. So
Mhm.
they're basically going to make a lot of Demon Fires for mechs. And yeah, it's an interesting enough mechanic. I don't really particularly like or dislike it. It's not particularly healthy or unhealthy for the arena. Um, it's nice to have a tribe that's going to be the focus of a expansion, because I feel like arena always gets in on it whenever there's a focus tribe. Like remember elementals in Ungoro? Like it's not like elementals were overpowered, but everybody played elementals. Why? Because there were so many of them. And
Yeah.
now we may not have a set bonus for these cards anymore, but we definitely can still see a lot of mechs, because they'll just be printing out a lot of mechs in this set, I assume.
Yep. All right. So spider bomb, that's something I'm looking forward to. I mean, if you just look at this as well, it's yeah, you have the buff opportunity, and the death rattle is just it has the deadly shot attached to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, man, with Hunter, it feels like for years now, like literally years. This is not hyperbole. Uh, Blizzard has just been looking at Hunter and just been trying to fit this like square peg into like a circle.
Well,
Like it's basically just trying to cram like combo hunter, control hunter, anything to just being like, yeah, we know you have the most aggressive hero power in the game, but like we kind of don't want you to use that. Like, we don't really want you to build around that. We want you to build around all of these control tools. And that's why we've had all of these, like, it's like Stampede, you have like Roke, Dalar, and then now you have like Mech Death Rattle hunters. Yeah, they really, man, like for the year that Face Hunter just destroyed any other deck, I think they're so scared about that. It's like, we can't do that. Like, we'll still feature hunters, and give them stuff, but like never again. Never just the Wolf Rider to the face.
Yeah. And that's because Blizzard really did not anticipate, like, I mean, they should have when they made the hero power for Hunter. They should have anticipated how low skill it would be to play Face Hunter. And they should also anticipate that, and they do, because they built the whole game based on the lowest common denominator. And they should anticipate that the lowest common denominator will have the most success with Face Hunter. And they should balance like that from the beginning, and they did not. And once they did not, they're in this bind right now where Face Hunter can never be good, or it will be problematic. They can't get out of it. It's the fastest way to ladder. It's the easiest deck to play. What else are you gonna do? So they have a little bit of a design fail over there for hunters, and that's influencing how they're going about it now. I don't know if it's something they can ever fix.
They can't, because just the hero power, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just because of the hero power, and this is one of those things.
And I want to emphasize that this is like just for lowest common denominator players. This is not for like the best players, or even for like good players. Like, good players can very well be in a state in which face hunters are not problematic at all, and Blizzard still can't allow face hunters to be good, because once you go a couple skill levels lower, then they are really, really good.
Right. But yeah, this is sort of the issue, right? Like, when you're talking about an oppressive aggro meta, it's not sort of this like smooth curve to get there. It's like sucks, completely OP.
Mm-hmm.
Because all they need is that like little tiny bit, and then suddenly they just like they're just way too good, right? Because it is just a difference of a few damage here and there.
I don't believe that, though, because you just put in more taunts in your deck if it's like that, and then you're fine, and the meta will adjust to that. I don't think that's it. I think the problem is in player skill disparities.
Well, sure. No, I mean, then they can just come out with other cards, right? But, they don't want it to happen, which they have to respond by, like, just another expansion. Or just like, oh, we have to do all of these nerfs again. I think, like, right now, they just want to prevent that from ever happening again. And that's why we're like where we are, right? Like, they're printing these sort of cards like Spider Bomb instead of, I don't know, like another sort of alley cat.
Okay. So moving on to the one other non-legendary card that they revealed so far. It's Biology Project, it's 1 mana, it's for the Druid, and each player gains a mana crystal. This is like a filled mana crystal. Each player gains 2 mana crystals. This is a filled mana crystal, not an empty one. So you're basically like innervating on this turn, or coining, however you want to think about it. But then your opponent gets to spend their 2 extra mana the turn after that, and ramps before you by 2. So you get to ramp 1 this turn, and then they get to ramp 2, and then you're ramping 2, and then it goes back and forth. So it's I like the design. It's a very balanced kind of card. In the arena, it's also useful because it will get you what you want if you build the deck around it, and even if it doesn't, you'll get a coin. Do we have word on whether you get a card if you're playing this at the very end and both players have 10 mana crystals?
I don't think we know yet.
Okay.
Actually, let's see.
Well, whether that happens or not will kind of determine whether it's playable or not in the arena. But if you do get the card, then it's like an interesting version of Wild Growth. Like, the problem with Wild Growth is you have to anti-tempo yourself for a turn. This, you don't anti-tempo yourself at all. You're just kind of swapping tempo around. You're speeding both players up. So I like the design.
The design is interesting. This is a card in which, man, I'm sure you can get a lot of use out of this in constructed. Whether or not it'll actually be powerful, that's whatever. But this is an extremely powerful way to ramp, right? So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, and I can also see people picking it in the arena as well. And man, Biology Project decks are going to be super annoying.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so like we don't have a lot to go on. The other three cards are legendaries. The only interesting thing, I guess we'll go over it very, very quickly before we move on. Stargazer Luna is a 3-mana 2/4 mage card. It says after you play the rightmost card in your hand, draw a card. So it's
That's your top
potential
deck.
infinite draw, and yeah, it also makes positioning in hand important now. Even though you don't get to move your cards around, it means you have to like kind of watch out for it. Whatever, not a terribly impactful card in the arena. This will be good. Another one is Shaman, 3-mana 3/3 elemental battlecry. Your next spell this turn cast twice. Again,
That's good.
It's good, but it's not like terribly overpowered. It's only a 3-mana 3/3, and once you have it triggered, you still need the right spells to make it really do amazing things. So for a legendary, right. It's like not out of control. So these are all like fine cards basically, and the interesting part is that they're all 3-mana, and this game doesn't have a lot of low mana legendaries, so you're gonna dilute some of the pools of like summon legendary stuff or adding legendary stuff into your deck. And the final legendary card is a 5-mana. It's a rogue card, right?
Yep. Rogue spell.
Rogue spell. Legendary spell. This is happening, guys. We've had legendary quests. We've had legendary weapons for every class. Now we're having legendary spells. Not the most creative design space, but why not use it if it's there, right? So draw the rest of your deck. That's what the card is. 5 mana. Draw the rest of your deck.
Yep.
Which means you don't get to draw anymore after that. It's kind of like you're milling yourself. You probably will mill yourself. But more importantly than milling yourself, you have no draws after this. That's it. And you start taking damage.
Right. But you do draw a ton of cards.
Yeah.
You do get to draw a lot of cards. So we'll see where they bucket this one, right?
I don't think this is playable in the arena.
It'll also just be interesting because, we talk about like Keening Banshee, we talk about Fel Reaver, we talk about all of this stuff. If/when someone plays this, the legit strategy of the other person immediately just becomes, I just have to survive 5 turns. That's basically it.
Yep.
Like, I just have to survive 5 turns. You almost never get that with Banshee, right? Like, such a small percentage of time will you actually go into fatigue, and the fatigue damage will matter. Like, this fatigue damage not only immediately matters, it's basically the win condition of the other player now. Like, so what this does is it provides the rogue player with so many tools, but suddenly this like win condition for the other player pops up, and all it is just like, okay, survive like 4 turns, 5 turns,
and you just win. It's a terrible card. Like, what it's meant for is for combos, so that you can be more sure to draw into your combos that like low mana and stuff. You don't do that in the arena. It's a terrible card. It's like a very terrible version of a Lunith. Like, a Lunith will draw you cards and give you a few turns before you start burning yourself, and you can end up with more cards that's actually usable because you draw them slower. But this, you just instantly mill yourself and start dying and not drawing cards. Like, it draws less cards than a Lunith. It only costs 1 less mana, and you start burning yourself like 4 turns quicker. Like, it's terrible. And a Lunith sucks. Like, it's not like a Lunith is a good card. Like, we had a rated like medium, and then we quickly realized, oh crap, this is actually a bad card. Right. This is going to be a terrible card. Like, I don't think there's a question about it.
Yeah, like I know people were talking about, it's like, oh, if you top deck this, it's ring. It's like, well,
no, it's terrible.
You're still spending 5 mana.
You're spending 5 mana to kill yourself.
It's like the 5 mana makes, I think, a big difference. If this was just like 2 mana, draw the rest of your deck, and then you have an extra 3 mana on that turn to put out something. I think that makes like a huge difference, right? Obviously, it makes a huge difference if you decrease something from 5 mana to 2 mana. But I agree. I don't see this being very good because in the arena, it's like, okay, you can draw a lot of cards. You're still constrained by mana, right? Especially so on the turn in which you play this. And then you are on an incredibly tight clock, and all the other player has to do is not die, and the rogue automatically dies. That's basically it. So instead of you forcing the other player to kill you, which is typical, it's like both of you guys have to like kill each other. All the other player has to do is just play defensive, right? Like, yeah, I think a lot of players are like really hyped up on this, but I just don't see it.
What, in the arena?
I don't see what
they're really hyped up on this in the arena. It's terrible.
Yeah,
it's 5 mana, anti-tempo, which makes your opponent be able to get on the board and hit you in the face, which is the last thing you want. You immediately skip your draw the next turn. So it's whatever amount of cards this card draws -1 just for the very next turn. Like, unless it's a top deck, you already have a card in your hand, so you're going to draw 9 at most. You're going to mill all the rest of your cards. Like, mill doesn't matter unless you run out of cards. This card basically says you're running out of cards right now. So mill does matter. And all those players that we make fun of who's like, Keating Banshee, like, what a terrible effect. We're going to keep it on the board and make you mill yourself. Well, they're right. If you mill yourself to the point of fatigue, milling is horrible for you. And this card says mill yourself to fatigue. It's unplayably terrible in the arena. No excuses, no asterisks. Like, it's just never pick this card. It's going to be in the lowest bucket. It's not about how they bucket it. They're going to put it in the lowest bucket. They're going to put.
I don't think it will be.
There's 3 buckets in legendaries.
From legendaries.
Yeah.
Right.
So unless you think there's no way this is not in the bottom 1/3.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be in the, like, I don't think Blizzard is going to put it there.
No, I don't care if Blizzard's going to put it there. I'm saying it'll be there in terms of,
sure, but, what we rate it doesn't matter.
Well,
in terms of,
what I'm saying is that's how good the card is. I'm not saying, how do you predict that Blizzard will suck? That's not the question. Blizzard can suck in many different ways, or they can get this one right, but we don't know about that. It's very obvious to me that this is going to be a terrible card. Like, this is going to be in the second half of the last bucket. Like, if you divide the buckets into 5, because there's now sub-buckets in Legendary, this is going to be in the bottom half of the third bucket. As Alunith is there too. Like, okay. So this is so that's what we have for Boomsday so far. If you can't tell by my tone throughout this podcast, I'm like the opposite of excited. I'm not like dreading it so much. I kind of expected a RNG heavy or like fun expansion to be coming, because we've been pretty serious for pretty long, and summer is usually the time when Hearthstone publishes a fun expansion. So I was kind of expecting it, and it's gonna go there. But I don't know. I just haven't seen anything terribly innovative here or terribly interesting for the arena. Magnetic would have been interesting if it worked on all minions instead of just being like a pure mech synergy.
Yeah, that's what I also don't like about it, because once again, it's sort of it pushes decks into the sort of the haves and have-nots.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's something I don't really enjoy. It's like, if you have this interaction, like, the best sort of interactions are ones that do have some aspects of RNG but are somewhat controlled, right? And aren't limited to, it's like, oh, you can only do this when you hold something in your hand, or when you have this type of minion on the board, right? That also increases sort of the it increases the swings, right? Increases the requirements, and typically because of this requirement, the benefit usually is a little bit greater, right? Because of this requirement. So yeah, in the arena, it just creates this, I think, unpleasant dynamic where, because if it's good enough, people chase after it, right? They chase after heavily.
I think people will chase after it.
And so what happens is you have people that hit it, and you have people that fail, right? And then there's another layer to it in which you either hit it in the game or you don't and you fail.
Yeah.
And this double layer of like you either get it or you don't, and that has a huge effect on your win rate in the draft and in the game. Oh man, that's something, and it's nothing new. That's the state of the game now. That's what we have, but it is not something I want to continue down.
Yep. It's going to make things worse on that end, but not like too much worse. Like you said, this is already kind of where the state of the game is. It's going to push it. It's going to nudge it in that direction. And that's the theme of mechs, right? Mechs buff mechs. That's always been the theme of mechs. It's not like they're going off theme or anything. And this is what the bucket system is for, right? Like, it's meant to control this a little bit, so it evens out a little bit of the haves and have-nots. Everybody can have mechs at very little cost. And the question is, okay, well then, do I have reasons to not make a mech deck? Like, are we all going to just make mech decks? I guess that's okay. There's nothing inherently terrible about mech decks, but we'll see. Like, when everybody was playing elementals back when Ungoro hit, I don't know, I didn't think it was like terribly fun on the elemental side. The elementals got a lot better after it got diluted. And and then it got to be like, oh, you could be an elemental something. Like, you had to like go for it, or you ended up with a couple of elementals and you're like, hey, I can now take this Servant of Kalamos and it's okay. Not like, I'll take a Servant of Kalamos whenever because I know I'm going to get this many elementals. So, you know, it's just nothing really exciting so far, but they haven't revealed most of the expansion. And I know myself, I know I get more excited about the expansion as they reveal more stuff and as it gets closer. So this is going to probably be me at my least excited about this expansion. So that's Boomsday. That's all we got for you right now for Boomsday. You want to go on to a question from the GOAT?
Sure. Question from the GOAT. Look, we have the Boomsday project, and obviously harkening back to the Goblins versus Gnomes set, right? Where we first saw Dr. Boom, where we saw all of these mechs. So my question is, since this is sort of an homage in some way to GVG, what GVG cards would you like to see reprinted?
Okay, so we had this conversation before we started recording the podcast, and I'm like, okay, it's a neutral card. Start taking guesses, Merps. Try to hit my top 3 cards. It took Merps 5 freaking guesses to hit one of my top 3, and he went down to like 8 total, and he still didn't get my top 1.
All right, so drum roll.
Why don't please, you guys listening to this just like take a moment and think and see if you can guess my favorite card in the GVG set? It is a neutral card.
Neutral card. And then of course, if anyone watches, you know, like my streams, they probably will
you've
know
said
mine.
It like
I've said it
so
how
many times.
Countless times.
Yeah, like
right,
if you don't know Merps's favorite GVG card that he would bring back in an instant, then you have not been listening to the Lightforge or watching the Coop.
But anyways, you have 3, so I think we should start your countdown.
All right, let's start my countdown. The GVG nostalgia lane. All right, we're gonna go. Let's go backwards. I will say this. I'm right now looking at our Twitch chat. And we're recording this, by the way, on a Friday night. So if you're listening to the podcast, this is not recorded on Sunday. If something happens between now and Sunday, I don't know what happened. But the Twitch chat has not gotten it. I'm pretty sure not a single person has gotten it in Twitch chat. The number 1. Okay, so my third most favorite card in the GVG set is Piloted Sky Golem.
Oh, ew. Okay.
I like it because it is RNG effect that is controllable and not overpowered. This is not Shredder. Like, I like that it is an epic. I like that it is huge. I like that at the point in which you play that, the RNG swing is not as terrible. And I like it that at the time that this card was played, I don't know how good it would be right now, but at the time that it was in GVG, there wasn't that many bad 4-drops. Like, your bad 4-mana cards were still, like, decently sized. Like, one of the worst ones you can get is Enhanso Mechano, which is also in the same set, and that's a 3-2. Like, you're not getting 1-1s. So Piloted Shredder is it would be number 3, and that's
You mean Pilot
Piloted
Sky
Sky
Golem.
Golem. That's a 6 mana 6/4 mech. Death Rattle, summon a random 4-cost minion. My second favorite card is Burly Rockjaw Trog. I like the design. I like that it's anti-spell. It's a 4 mana 3/5. Whenever your opponent casts a spell, gain +2 attack. So if your opponent casts a spell, this card becomes really good. And you're kind of like soft preventing your opponent from casting spells. And you guys all know I hate spells. So I really like that this card was very much a part of the arena meta and people just had it. And it really limited what your opponent can do. But it doesn't stop them, right? All you get is 2 attack if they use a spell. If they need to use a spell, they're going to use the spell. Okay. Number 1. Still, I'm sure no one in chat has gotten this. They've guessed like more than half of the cards that exist in GVG.
Yeah. All right.
Wow. Where are the hardcore fans that remember how excited I get about this card? Like back in the days of GVG. There we go. Someone finally got it. Swede. Thank you for being the only person, at least that I saw, that has hit on the right card. It is Ogre Brute. 3 mana 4/4, 50% chance to attack the wrong enemy.
Why do you like this card?
Because it is a balanced 3 mana 4/4. It was the first 3 mana 4/4, and it was good because your opponent at that time when it was Curvestone, when you can like buff the Ogre Brute by a little bit and then you just kind of like snowball out of control. So your opponent was kind of forced to remove it a lot of the times, even though its penalty is when it attacks. It's really good design for RNG. So if you notice, 2 of my 3 favorite cards actually had RNG in it. So you may think of me as like a not fun player, but I like it when Blizzard does RNG right, in a more controlled way that causes less swings.
Yeah. I think both of us are right. If you listen to this podcast a lot, you might get the impression it's like, wow, Adux and Murphs are like anti-RNG. It's like, no. There's good RNG and there's bad RNG.
Like, we play this game for a reason, and we play Arena for a reason. It's even more RNG, right? It's about controlling the RNG. That's what we enjoy. And Ogre Brute is the best. And for people who are talking about Kobold Barbarian, and why do you not like Kobold Barbarian? Kobold Barbarian takes away your choice of whether to attack or not. So often with Ogre Brute, you're like, I can't do this. This is too risky. You are evaluating the risk of whether to give up your attack or not. Ogre Brute just makes it that much more skill-less. And this is already a card that's taking away your control half the time, right? You don't want to add more RNG to it. Again, this is the difference between pure RNG to somewhat controlled RNG to Ogre Brute, which, in my opinion, is a perfect amount of RNG, and you get the perfect amount of extraness to deal with that RNG. It's just the interplay of the fact that this is just a 3 mana 4/4 if your opponent chooses to remove it. You only get the downside if you have to attack with it, and you don't have to attack with it. It's so well designed. I love this card.
Cool. All right, so on to my favorite card. You guys know this by now. It's Matter Bomber, right? And once again, stressing the point that we're not against RNG. We just want healthy RNG, right? And we've seen, I think, too many examples of that sort of like what I would consider unhealthy RNG. Yeah. So, you know, the Spiteful Summoners, right? Mm-hmm. The MCTs, or just like the Raven Familiars, right? It's like the worst kind of joust. It's like spell joust.
And only the large joust, right?
Right.
Like that's the fundamental problem with joust. Like, if you're getting something, you're also getting a big thing.
Right. Or, like, at least with Joust, it was like, oh, gain, like, +1/+1 sometimes, right?
Yeah, if
with
you win the Joust.
Raven Familiar, it's like, draw your Flame Strike.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, you don't just draw a card. You draw your, like, Blizzard. Actually, it's always Blizzard. Sorry, it's never Flame Strike. It's always Blizzard. But yeah, so Matter Bomber, I think it's a perfect example in which you need to assess the board state, right? Mm-hmm. So many times you have to think, what's my highest percentage here? What trades do I have to make? Like, you know, do I go face first maybe? Or do I actually just trade in and then play Matter Bomber? it's going to create moments that win you the
Mm-hmm.
game. It's going to create moments that completely lose you the game, right? Or it's going to hit your guy's Rilla twice, and then you can go to their face for a
Yes.
bazillion damage. Yes. That was a magical, great moment for us.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like this is, I think that's the sort of RNG that everyone will accept, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think it's hard to identify exactly where that line is. If you're like, Merps, give me the perfect line between like where it crosses from acceptable to unacceptable, and vice
Ogre
versa.
Brute and Kobold Barbarian. That's the line.
Something like
Ogre
that.
Brute is like the
Yeah.
best designed RNG card ever, in my opinion. And Kobold Brute is just a silly RNG card that I don't like. And it's not like the most terrible card or anything, but it just like unnecessarily became a bad card.
Yeah. So look, that's definitely a card that I miss, and I think if you introduce Matter Bomber into the game, I think people would like very much so appreciate it. And it was a
Yeah.
card that which even back then it wasn't that good,
Mm-hmm.
right? It wasn't.
It was good.
It was
Let's not
good.
downplay how good it was, but it
No,
wasn't like
no, no, no.
brokenly good, right? It wasn't like tier
Right.
one good.
And you know what? Now that I look, and this is the state of the game that we're in. I was telling Adam as well. I was like, first of all, look at Little Exorcists, right?
Yeah.
That thing was terrible. You never
It
drafted
was a
Little
3 mana
Exorcist.
2/3 taunt with Battlecry gain +1/+1 for each enemy Death Rattle minion.
And now, just because of the amount of death rattles in the game and just the amount of like random weird stuff in the game,
Mm-hmm.
right? Little Exorcist, depending on the bucket, obviously, very pickable card.
Yeah.
It's gonna hit like a decent amount, and on average, you're going to get like, 3 mana, kind of like, if not 3/4, then 3/3 ish, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's decent. Even looking at something, and now we're talking about the worst of the worst cards. Looking at something like Junkbot, right? Whenever a friendly mech dies, gain +2/+2. Now, when I look at it through the lens
It's a
of
5 mana 1/5.
yeah, oh
In
yeah,
case
sorry.
you guys were wondering why we think this, like, why everyone thought this card sucks.
Junkbot is a 5 mana 1/5 mech.
Mhm.
Like you wouldn't even pay 3 mana for a 1/5, right? Like that's
No.
yeah. So 5 mana 1/5. Whenever a friendly mech dies, gain +2/+2. Now when I look at a card like this through the lens of bucketing, I'm like,
Yeah.
if they feature it and if you can get mechs through bucketing,
Mhm.
I'm like, you could draft this.
You could definitely draft
Whereas
this. A 3/7 is like totally fine for 5 mana, so you only have to kill
Right.
one mech on the turn you play it, and it's fine.
right. And whereas before, this was
Yeah,
I
like
don't
never
care
play.
what your
Yeah.
I don't care what your draft is. You never draft Junkbot.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of like it's just interesting when we look back at GVG cards and you look at the state of the game now, how the game, like how the drafts are done, how much people almost have to reach a little bit, right? Like you can't win with your Yetis anymore. You can't
Nope.
like you can't just win with like a good 2-drop into a good 3-drop into a good 4-drop, or like a standard like
Mm-hmm.
sort of play, right? You need all these crazy temple cards. You need a lot more.
God, you know what I miss?
What did you miss? Hemet Nessingwary?
Puddle Stomper.
I know you missed Photo Stomper. That thing was good.
It was just a raptor that they made a Murloc instead of a beast. And
They
that's
did.
all the arena needs. Just like 3 of those cards in every expansion.
Well,
And
remember
we're
like
good.
Mini Trog, Stone Splinter Trog,
Slow
which was
Splinter Trog, perfect. 2 mana 2/3. Whenever your opponent casts a spell, gain +1 attack. Never gets
Prevents
out
some
of
coin
control.
plays.
Prevents some coin plays. Has a little bit of flavor. Is a 2-drop. So good. Just bring them back. You don't have to get fancy. We don't need your micro machines. We definitely don't need your ship's cannons. But like, just reskin some cards. Put them out again. Like, no one will criticize you, Blizzard, for being lazy. We want you to be lazy. Stop being fancy. Just be nice and lazy with your 2-drops.
Yep. All right. So that's kind of the throwback question with
Mhm.
GVG. I look back at it fondly now. I know a lot of people are just like, oh man, it ruined the game. Lots of tempo. but looking at just sort of the power level of the cards here, right?
Yeah.
And now I'm just like, wow, this was it. There are only a few cards in which I'm just like, okay, they'll never do this again. Glavezuka for one, right?
Oh God.
I mean, well, that's Hunter. Like, it's
Yeah.
just you can't print Glavezuka for Hunter. You just can't.
Mhm.
It's way too good.
Mhm.
And the game would just be won on like with one drop plus Glavezuka,
I don't understand how they print Gladezuka and Cobra Shot in the same set.
well, maybe their idea was, hey, we'll balance out Glavezuka by
By putting in
Cobra
a
Shot.
Cobra Shot.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then of course, we have the infamous Shielded Minibot, Muster for Battle, and Coghammer.
Yeah. In all
Yeah.
seriousness, Shielded Minibot is not insane these days anymore. That's kind of sad. Like, it would still be the best 2-drop, but like overall power level to other cards, it's not like that
Oh
terrible.
no. Oh yeah, the game is so much more complex now,
Mhm.
right? It's like a 2-mana 2/2 Divine Shield. It's like, yeah, it's pretty good, I guess.
Yeah, like one of the top
Um,
2-drops, whereas before it was like, this is doubly as powerful as your other 2-drops. Why?
Also, nowadays, how OP would Quartermaster be?
Oh my God.
Because you get a 2/5 body, and like
Uh-huh.
level up is already good,
Yeah.
right? Or like,
Yeah.
you see level up in the arena as well sometimes. But Quartermaster, you get a 2/5 body on there.
It
at
gives
the
your
same
silver
time.
hand recruits +2/+2.
I know.
That's
Yeah.
silly.
So,
And how bad
and
was, like, okay, Snow Chugger?
that was oppressive.
That was
That was
terrible. It was so terrible they had to actually ban it in the arena. Like, that's how terrible it was for the arena.
well, look, they banned it, but I say part of it is just like not saying Snow Chugger was, the power level of all those other cards that they banned. They just had to ban some cards
No, it was
to bring
terrible. It
down.
shut down all things Warrior could do, and it shut down half the things Rogue could do. It was like Snow Chugger. It doesn't seem like it, but it's effectively like Dragon Slayer.
Right. Yeah. Except instead of dragons, it was 2 classes.
Yeah, like it's terrible. It was a horrible design for limited, if not also for constructed. No, they didn't design for limited at all back then. So this is the stuff we got.
Yep.
I don't know. Like Valen's chosen. You know what? Look at this. I don't miss GVG when it comes to like the set overall. It's just the neutral cards I miss. Their neutral cards are nice. The class cards are a bit ridiculous.
The class cards, I'm like, wow, there were some really sickeningly disgusting cards.
Light Bomb.
Right.
Goblin Auto Barber. Jeez. I
know.
That card.
Goblin Auto Barber.
Why?
When the rogues would just coin out a dagger and you're just like, oh, I know it's coming.
They're gonna win this game. That's what's coming.
They're gonna win. Or
Crackle. Crackle's not even a good card, but like I just hate it.
Play. I know. It's like, oh man. I think Crackle was the perfect example when people just like broke down over the RNG contained within one card. I think it was just Crackle. They were just like, we can't do this.
Like if you look at the design of Crackle, you're like, this card could have been so much worse actually. It's not even like that bad for what it's trying to do. It's 2 mana, deal 3 to 6 damage to like anywhere including face, and overload 1. So it's like 3 mana, deal 4.5 damage. But like super random. It's
super random.
Like it could have been more random. I don't know. I think it's one of those things where like it does cause players to break down, but
it was even more random because of the hero power.
That's true. There's also the hero power that adds an extra damage. Terrible. Terrible. Mistress of Pain is in the set. Oh my god.
It should be your favorite set, right?
I miss Mistress of Pain. That's such a balanced 2-drop. Yeah, okay, that was not a balanced card, but Mistress of Pain was a perfectly balanced 2-drop with a lot of flavor. Loved it.
Right. Well, anyways, we went down memory lane, and then we just remembered all of these OP class cards.
Okay, all right. Well, let's end this with that was a question from the GOAT, a really freaking long question from the GOAT, brought to you by our patrons, patreon.com/grinninggoat. Thank you guys so much for continuously supporting us. I guess we'll end this with Card Good Bad and Wisp, and we won't set up the next Card Good Bad because we're gonna go into Boomsday stuff from here on out, and we won't get to the next one for like a long time, and it will probably likely be a Boomsday card that we haven't seen yet. So there's no point in setting the next one up. But we'll talk about our Card Good Bad for today, which is Wisp. But before that, I want to say that there are two big announcements that's coming from the GOAT. One of which will happen early next week, assuming nothing, no problematic things happen. The other one I was gonna do at the end of this week, but maybe next week is a better time for it. But it's already like it's out there on the internet, and no one has found it and tracked me down and like tweeted at me or like sent me a message on Reddit. Nothing, which is crazy because it's like the internet, right? You figure when something happens, like everybody's like on it and it spreads. But you know, maybe you can do some sleuthing and figure it out. Otherwise, I'll talk about it. Maybe next week. We'll see. It's pretty exciting news. Okay, so with that very mysterious setup for the next couple of weeks going on, we won't actually have another Boomsday card until 2 weeks from now. No, not 2 weeks. Like 1 week and a few days, right? Like that Monday, from when you're probably listening to this, like 1 or 2 Mondays afterwards. It's like 23rd or something, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
It's like the 23rd is when they're gonna start their Boomsday's card reveals, and that's gonna go 2 weeks, assuming everything's normal. And then it'll be released the week after that. So we're guessing August 9th is going to be the release date of Boomsday. So keep that in mind. All right. Let's end on card good, bad.
All right, Wisp. Look, a lot of people like this card for various reasons. I've had it in like a couple of decks recently, mostly because I've been playing a lot of Hunter, and then Warrior, and also Warlock, right? So I had a Snowflipper Penguin and a Wisp in like the Warlock deck and the Hunter deck, and it sort of just makes sense, right? For Hunter, we just need to be as aggressive as possible, and for the Warlock, well, you know, I'm very happy to get tempo out onto the board to protect my face, and then I can safely hero power, you know, make good trades on the board. It's been good. It's been quite good, and just because it's kind of the effect that we saw with what was that? Like the Broodmother,
That's
right?
what I was
Like,
gonna say.
yeah,
Broodmother's win rate was through the roof, and it's a 5 mana 5/5 that gives you a wisp when it gets drawn.
right. So with that card, it's kind of the same principle. So you can look at it this way: Wisp is like a Broodmother, or Broodmother is like a Wisp, except one doesn't give you the choice of when to put it down, and then just gives you a 5 mana.
It doesn't lose you
5/5.
card advantage the way Wisp
Right.
does.
And then for the decks in which I play, like aggressively, or you know, I'm just a Warlock, I would much rather have the choice of when to put it down rather than you know, just sort of have it plop onto the board and then have a 5 mana 5/5 in my hand, which, let's face it, is not like the best thing ever. Um, so I found quite often that having that extra 1/1 on the board was very useful, and because, you know, you can combo it with stuff, right? With Hunter, it's Hunter's Mark. With Warlock, I had an Unwilling Sacrifice, so I could always just drop it and then kill off the Penguin, and then chat would yell at me. But the extra tempo always helped out a ton. And I would say, obviously, Wisp is not for every single deck. And you always pester me with this question. It's like, how good do you think Wisp is? And I'm like, if I'm, let's say, Mage, right? And I just wouldn't draft Wisp. I need that extra card. But if I'm Hunter, in which case,
Don't worry, guys. Merps just doesn't know how to play Mage.
Yeah. Wisp.
He
Mage.
doesn't understand like the explosive runes and the pyroblast. He's all about like, I don't know, polymorphs or something.
Yeah. But I would say in Hunter and in Warlock, the Wisp was very useful. Tempo for Hunter, right? And just a delayed ping, but a very mana efficient delayed ping. And for Warlock, man, it was good at triggering Defile. It was good at triggering Unwilling Sacrifice. Just good with giving me extra tempo as well. So I think if you're playing those classes especially, and we can even lump like paladin into there, right? Perhaps if you have a lot of combos with rogue, you can lump that in there as well. There are certain classes in which I think Wisp
All
can actually be a
classes,
stand. Yeah,
Merps.
all
All
classes.
classes is what you're
So
going
many
for.
classes.
Wisp is good in all classes. Why? Because it's infinite tempo. We all know this. We've known this from the beginning of Classic. This is not a new card. But I do think it is one of the most underexplored cards for how unique it is in the entirety of the meta, because people don't like drafting Wisps. And if you track the tier list, Wisp's relationship with Cho and Yeti has kind of been all over the place, depending on the meta and depending on our mood. And we were really doing curve thinking over the past few weeks, and we were coming out with like a much more advanced curve calculator. That's actually not gonna. The best part at this point is that the algorithm is so sophisticated. Where I'm like, I've made this like 50% more sophisticated, and it's like, your cards move 2 points. Why? Because it was already pretty much right. But now it got like a little more accurate. And so we're still tweaking around with it. And one of the issues was like, how do you deal with Wisp when it comes to what it does on curve, right? Because adding an extra attack and health onto the board on like turn 2 or turn 1 is kind of insane, right? Adding it on turn 10 is not really going to do you much, and you are losing a lot of card advantage by playing Wisp. So the system is evaluating all that. It's around a 77 right now. When the new curve calculator comes in, it's actually going to drop by a tiny bit. But the question that I kept pestering Merps with during this time is, what would you take? Wisp or Murloc Raider? What would you take? Wisp or Murloc Raider? And the answer, if you're thinking about it, is probably like, I don't know, one or the other, or most people probably lean towards Murloc Raider. To which the question is, why? Murloc Raider has one more stat for one more mana. That's it. That's a terrible trade-off. It's not like you could play it earlier or whenever. And Wisp has way more combos than Murloc Raider does. Like, why would you ever take Murloc Raider over Wisp? And if you can answer that question successfully, because I think it's the right answer, I think Murloc Raider actually is better than Wisp, or they're like about the same, even though there's no reason that should be. Like, I think it's very difficult for people to really put their finger on why it is that one extra attack is worth so much more, especially when that one extra attack is attached to the most like pathetic possible body, right? Like, it's the most vulnerable body.
I gave you the my explanation for it, like, because it's class dependent, right? Like, when I am mage, so I told you, if I'm hunter and warlock, most of the time I would like the Wisp. If I'm mage,
yeah, I don't think you're right though on that.
Oh,
I know that's your answer, but I don't think you're right. There's nothing inherent about any class besides maybe rogue because of combo potential and hunter because it's hunter. I guess warlock has and warlock because there's.
Well, it goes to the class's ability to reload, right? Or
no,
like, it goes to their ability to completely capitalize on that tempo.
That's like saying what, but like that's like saying like which class would tempo cards work better for. That's all you're saying. That's not like, yes, obviously a purely tempo card, but like a purely tempo card will work better for classes that work better with tempo. But it's not bad in classes in which tempo is okay. Like, does mage hate tempo? No, tempo is a normal thing for the mage. It has no like particularly impressive synergies with tempo. But it's doing the same thing. And remember, you're comparing it not against like Arcane Intellect here or Yeti. You're comparing it against Murloc Raider. Which...
Right. But no, in your example, tempo definitely does more for the hunter than it does for the mage.
Yeah.
Just overall. Like, it's not like if we're just, measuring sort of one.
Well, I don't know why you want to say it's class dependent when you mean it's deck dependent. Because you can have tempo in any class. You can have more aggressive decks in every class. No, that'll tilt it towards air, but it's not like you can't make an aggro any class.
Well, right, but it tilts it towards it, which is what determines. It's like literally, if you tilt something, like if I tilt something up to a point, it'll drop, right?
No, but that's like saying like what would make, I don't know, like why is Pyroblast so good? And you're like it's really good in Hunter, and it's like okay, fine, but that's not the question. Like I'm not disagreeing with like the fact that you're listing specific
Well, no,
facts,
but that's not what you're asking. It would be as like you saying, is Pyroblast better than Blizzard?
right?
In which case, I would say Pyroblast and Hunter is better than Blizzard and Hunter. You know, something like that,
And which
right?
I will say,
But
what
in
all you're
Mage,
saying is that Pyroblast in an aggressive deck is better than Blizzard. Not in Hunter. It's just easier to make an aggressive deck in Hunter because of the hero power. Like, there's nothing inherent about Hunter that make Wisp better for it.
well, it's the hero power plus the whole package of
Right,
Hunter. It's like all
exactly.
the other cards that they have.
So you can easily make a mage in which Wisp is better than in a Hunter in which Wisp is worse.
No. You can't easily make like that. That's
I'm
the
not
thing.
saying
I
more
don't
often than
understand.
not, but I'm saying it happens like 25% of the time. Like, I
Okay,
think
yeah,
you're
so it
stuck in this
can
mindset
happen.
where whenever you make Hunter, it is aggressive or it is fast mid range. And whenever you make Mage, it is control. But that's not Hunter, and that's not Mage. There's just a thumb on the scale on each of those classes towards those, but you're playing limited. You're playing a game in which you can draft whichever way, and there's not a correct archetype to draft for each particular class. It depends on the cards you're offered.
All right. Anyways, that's our Wisp assessment. Definitely don't be afraid to draft it, guys. I think it's worked out quite well for quite a few people. You know, I'm looking at the chat right now, and a lot of people have gotten good results with Wisp, and you know, it makes a lot of sense, right? It's just infinite value, or not value, but like infinite tempo. So try it out. Let us know. And oh right, we don't have the card for next week.
There's no card for next week because we'll figure out what's happening next week. It's gonna probably be a Boomsday thing. Okay, so until next week, this is Adwicta.
This is Merps. See you guys.
All right, we're not doing a road coop. I